I was doing 75 down Highway 82 at 2 in the morning when I realized I'd stolen from a church. Not just any church. The church where my grandmother had been baptized in 1958, where my parents got married, where I'd sung Jesus Loves Me in Sunday school while Miss Patricia handed out graham crackers and apple juice. The envelope sat on my passenger seat, fat with cash from the building fund, $3,200. I knew the exact amount because I'd counted it twice in the church office. Before my hands started shaking so bad I had to stop. The headlights caught a deer on the shoulder, and I swerved, my heart hammering. In that split second, I thought this was it. This was how I'd die. Wrapped around a pine tree on a back highway in Alabama, with stolen church money in my lap. And the worst part? The absolute worst part was that some small, dark corner of my mind whispered that maybe I deserved it. Maybe this was God's way of stopping me before I got any further away. But the deer bolted into the woods, and I kept driving, and nothing stopped me at all. Before I continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location and what time it is where you are in the comments. It means the world to me to know who's hearing this story. But to understand how I got here, I need to take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Collinsville, Alabama, population 2,100, where everybody knew everybody, and your business wasn't your own. My name is Marcus Webb, and I was 28 years old when this story really starts, though the seeds of it were planted way before that. I was the kid who showed up to every church service. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday evening. My dad, Ron Webb, was a deacon. My mom, Linda, played piano for the choir. We were what people called a good Christian family, the kind other families were supposed to look up to. The truth is, I never chose any of it. I was born into it the way some kids are born into farming families or military families. Church wasn't something we did. It was something we were. And for a long time, I was okay with that. I liked the potlucks and the youth group trips to Six Flags. I liked that Ashley Morrison smiled at me during worship when we were 16. I even liked some of the sermons, the ones where Pastor Gene talked about grace instead of hell. But somewhere around my junior year of high school, questions started creeping in. Little ones at first. Like, why did God care if I said dang instead of damn? Why was it a sin to drink a beer but not a sin to eat 3 plates of fried chicken at the church picnic? And bigger ones, scarier ones. If God was real, why did he feel so far away when I prayed? Why did I feel more alive listening to Nirvana in my car than I did singing hymns? I never asked these questions out loud. You didn't do that at Hillcrest Baptist Church. Questions meant doubt. And doubt meant your faith wasn't strong enough. And if your faith wasn't strong enough, well, maybe you weren't really saved at all. So I kept my mouth shut and played the part. I got baptized when I was 12, because that's what you did. I went on a mission trip to Appalachia when I was 17 and helped build a wheelchair ramp for an elderly woman named Betty, who made us sweet tea so thick you could stand a spoon in it. I even dated Callie Henderson for 2 years because she was a youth group leader and my mom loved her and everyone said we'd make a godly couple. Callie was beautiful in that wholesome Midwest kind of way. Blonde hair always in a ponytail, blue eyes that crinkled when she laughed. A cross necklace she never took off. She loved Jesus more than anything, more than her nursing degree, more than her family, more than me. Which should have been fine, which I wanted to be fine with. But it wasn't. Do you ever wonder, I asked her once, sitting in my truck outside her apartment after church, if we're just doing all this because it's what we're supposed to do? She'd looked at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank. What do you mean? I mean, I'd struggled to find the words. Do you ever feel like you're going through the motions? Like you're pretending? Marcus. She'd reached over and taken my hand. That's the enemy talking. You need to pray harder. We both do. That was her answer to everything. Pray harder. Read your Bible more. Get plugged into a small group. Like faith was a muscle you could build if you just did enough reps. We broke up 3 months later. She said I was pulling her away from God. I said she was more in love with the idea of being a pastor's wife than she was with me. We were both probably right. After Callie, I drifted. I still showed up at church because not showing up would have killed my mother. But I sat in the back and left during the last song. I got a job as an assistant manager at the Ace Hardware on Main Street, which paid enough to rent a one-bedroom apartment above the barber shop. I dated a girl named Tasha who didn't go to church at all, and for a few months that felt like freedom. But freedom is a tricky thing. Without the structure of church, without the schedule of services and small groups and accountability partners, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd spent my whole life being told who I was, Ron and Linda's son, a member of Hillcrest Baptist, a young man of God. Take that away, and I was just Marcus, just some guy in a small town with no plan and no purpose. That's when the drinking started. Nothing crazy at first, just a couple beers after work, then a couple more. Then a bottle of Jack Daniels I kept under my bathroom sink for the nights when the silence in my apartment got too loud. I told myself I wasn't an alcoholic. Alcoholics were the guys you saw on street corners or in AA meetings. I was just coping. My parents noticed. Of course they did. Mom cried at the kitchen table and asked where they'd gone wrong. Dad gave me the silent treatment for 2 weeks, then sat me down and said, I needed to get right with God. I don't even know if I believe in God anymore, I'd said, and the look on his face made me wish I could take it back. Don't say that, he'd whispered. Don't ever say that. But I'd already said it, and once the words were out, they couldn't be shoved back in. Things got worse after that. I stopped answering my mom's calls. I stopped going to church altogether. Which, in a town like Collinsville, was like painting a target on your back. People talked. They always talked. Did you hear about the web boy? Such a shame. His parents are heartbroken. I got fired from Ace Hardware for showing up late one too many times. Tasha dumped me because, in her words, you're a mess, Marcus, and I didn't sign up for this. I couldn't argue with her. For a while, I lived off my savings and odd jobs, mowing lawns, helping people move, fixing fences. But savings run out, and odd jobs don't pay the rent. By the time I was 28, I was 2 months behind on rent. My truck needed a new transmission I couldn't afford, and I had $17 in my bank account. That's when I ran into Pastor Gene at the grocery store. He was older than I remembered, his hair more gray than brown, but he still had that same kind smile. Marcus Webb, he'd said, like he was genuinely happy to see me. It's been too long. I'd tried to make an excuse and leave, but he'd put a hand on my shoulder. I know things have been hard, he'd said, but the door is always open. You know that, right? I'd nodded because I didn't know what else to do. Actually, he'd said, I've been meaning to reach out. We need someone to help with some maintenance around the church. Painting, repairs, yard work. It's not much, but it pays. Would you be interested? I should have said no. I should have known better. But I needed the money, and some stupid part of me thought maybe this was a sign. Maybe God, if he was even real, was throwing me a rope. Yeah, I'd said, I could do that. So I went back. Not to the services, but to the building. I painted the fellowship hall, fixed a leaky faucet in the women's bathroom, replaced the rotted boards on the back deck. Pastor Gene paid me in cash every Friday, and for a few weeks, things felt almost normal. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, I was in the church office looking for a screwdriver when I saw the envelope on Pastor Gene's desk. It was labeled Building Fund in his careful handwriting, and it was open, the stack of bills visible inside. I wasn't planning to take it. I swear I wasn't. But I stood there staring at it, and all I could think about was my landlord's threat to evict me, the check engine light in my truck, the emptiness in my fridge. And I thought, just this once. Just enough to get caught up. I'd pay it back. I'd barely made it to my truck before the guilt hit. Not the kind of guilt that stops you, the kind that chases you. The kind that sits in your passenger seat while you drive too fast down dark highways, whispering that you've finally become exactly what you were afraid of. A thief. A fraud. A man so far from God that not even mercy could reach him now. But I didn't know yet how wrong I was about that last part. I made it to the Georgia state line before I had to pull over and throw up on the side of the road. The envelope sat on my dashboard, glowing in the dome light like it was radioactive. $3,200. The building fund they'd been collecting for 6 months to fix the church roof. Money that elderly folks on fixed incomes had given $5 and $10 at a time. Money that single moms had contributed instead of buying new shoes for their kids. And I'd taken it. I sat there in the dirt with my head between my knees, dry heaving even though there was nothing left in my stomach. A semi-truck roared past and the wind from it nearly knocked me over. I thought about my grandmother, who died when I was 15. She used to say that God's love was like the ocean. You could run from it all you wanted, but it would just keep coming in waves. At the time, I'd thought it was beautiful. Now it felt like a threat. I got back in my truck and kept driving. I told myself I'd go to Atlanta. It was big enough to disappear in, far enough that nobody from Collinsville would find me. I'd get a job under the table somewhere. Construction, maybe? Or restaurant work. I'd send the money back once I got on my feet. Pastor Gene would never have to know it was me. Even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. I stopped at a gas station just outside Columbus around 4 in the morning. The fluorescent lights made everything look sickly and unreal. I bought a coffee I didn't drink and a pack of cigarettes I'd never smoked before, just to have something to do with my hands. The clerk, a kid who couldn't have been older than 19, looked at me with such indifference that I almost envied him. To be that young and that unburdened by your own choices. Back in the truck, I counted the money again. $3,200. I separated out $200 for gas and food, folded it into my wallet, and stared at the rest. This was someone's answered prayer. Some family had probably prayed for months that God would provide the money to fix that roof before winter came and the leaks got worse. And God had provided it through dozens of faithful people who gave what they could. And then I'd stolen it. The sun was coming up when I pulled into a rest area and finally fell asleep in the cab of my truck, using the envelope as a pillow like some kind of terrible joke. I woke up 6 hours later to someone knocking on my window. My heart nearly exploded. I jerked upright, the envelope falling to the floor, and found myself staring at a state trooper. He was young, maybe early 30s, with the kind of jawline you see in recruitment posters. He motioned for me to roll down the window. "You okay, sir?" he asked. His name tag said, Officer Bryant. "Yeah," I croaked. My mouth tasted like something had died in it. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." He looked at me for a long moment, taking in my bloodshot eyes, my wrinkled shirt, the general disaster of my life. "You been drinking?" "No, sir. Just driving all night. License and registration." My hands shook as I pulled them from my glove box. He took them back to his patrol car while I sat there, sweating, the envelope on the floor, between my feet like a bomb. If he asked to search the truck, if he found the money, I'd have to explain where it came from. And then it would be over. Not just being caught, my entire life. My parents would find out. The whole church would know. I'd go to jail. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Each second felt like an hour. Finally, Officer Bryant came back and handed me my license. "Everything checks out," he said. "But you need to get some real sleep. There's a motel about 15 miles up the road. You're going to kill somebody driving like this, maybe yourself." "Yes, sir. I managed. He started to walk away, then turned back. You sure you're okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, I said. Just a rough night. He nodded slowly, like he didn't quite believe me but didn't have cause to push it. Drive safe, he said, and walked back to his car. I sat there for another 10 minutes after he left, waiting for my heart to stop racing. That's when it hit me. I'd just gotten away with it. The cop had run my license and found nothing. Nobody was chasing me. Nobody even knew the money was gone yet. It was Wednesday morning. Pastor Gene probably wouldn't check the envelope until Friday when he made the bank deposit. I had 2 full days before anyone noticed. I could actually do this. I could disappear. I pulled back onto the highway and drove for Atlanta, the city rising up in the distance like a promise of anonymity. I found a motel in a sketchy part of town that took cash and didn't ask questions. $45 a night for a room that smelled like mildew and cigarettes, with a TV that only got 3 channels and a mattress that sagged in the middle. It was perfect. That first day, I barely left the room. I sat on the bed with the envelope in my lap, trying to figure out my next move. I needed a job, but most places wanted a resume, references, a permanent address. I needed an apartment, but that required first and last month's rent plus a security deposit. The math wasn't working out. $3,000 felt like a fortune until you tried to build a life on it. By the second day, I was going stir crazy. I walked to a McDonald's 3 blocks away and sat in a booth for 2 hours, making one coffee last as long as possible. I watched people come and go, construction workers on their lunch break, moms with screaming toddlers, teenagers skipping school, normal people living normal lives, nobody looking over their shoulder, nobody running. I wanted that so badly, it hurt. On Friday morning, my phone started blowing up. I'd turned it off since leaving Collinsville, but I powered it on just to check the time and immediately regretted it. 17 missed calls from my mom, 8 from my dad, 5 from Pastor Gene. A dozen text messages, each one more frantic than the last. Mom, Marcus, please call me. We're worried sick. Dad, where are you? Call home now. Pastor Gene, Marcus, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Please call me as soon as you get this. And then, at 10:47 a.m., the one that made my stomach drop, Pastor Gene, Marcus, I know about the money. Please, just come back. We can work this out. I dropped the phone like it had shocked me. He knew. Somehow, he knew. Maybe he'd checked the envelope early. Maybe he'd seen me in his office. Maybe God himself had told him that was the kind of thing Pastor Gene would believe. I paced the motel room, my mind racing. Coming back wasn't an option. If I went back now, I'd face charges. Theft from a church was serious. I could go to prison. And even if I didn't, even if Pastor Gene somehow convinced the church not to press charges, I'd still be the guy who stole from his own church. That label would follow me for the rest of my life. No, I'd made my choice. I had to keep going. I packed my stuff, left the key on the dresser, and checked out. I had enough money for maybe 2 more weeks if I was careful. 2 weeks to find a job, to disappear into this city, to become someone else. I was 3 blocks from the motel when I passed a liquor store. I told myself I'd just go in for a minute, just to calm my nerves. Just one drink to take the edge off. I walked out with a bottle of cheap whiskey and a case of beer, and I knew I was lying to myself again. That night, I drank until the guilt turned fuzzy and distant. I drank until I couldn't remember my grandmother's face or the sound of my mother's voice. I drank until I almost believed I was someone else, someone who hadn't stolen from a church, someone who hadn't run away, like a coward. But even drunk, even with my eyes closed and the room spinning, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was chasing me. Something that knew exactly where I was and wasn't going to give up, no matter how fast or how far I ran. I just didn't know yet that the thing chasing me wasn't judgment. It was mercy. And mercy, I was about to learn, doesn't run out of breath. I woke up on a park bench 3 days later with no memory of how I got there. The sun was beating down on my face, making my headache feel like someone was driving nails into my skull. My mouth tasted like ash and regret. When I sat up, the world tilted sideways and I had to grab the bench to keep from falling. The envelope was gone. I patted my pockets frantically. Jacket, jeans, everywhere. Nothing. I checked the ground around the bench, crawled through the grass on my hands and knees like a madman. A woman jogging past gave me a wide berth, pulling her dog closer. I didn't blame her. I probably looked like exactly what I was, a drunk who'd hit bottom. Gone. Over $3,000, just gone. Either I'd lost it or someone had rolled me while I was passed out. Either way, it was over. My great escape had lasted less than a week, and now I had nothing. Not the money, not a plan, not even enough dignity left to be angry about it. I sat back on the bench and laughed. Actually laughed, this broken, bitter sound that scared a couple of pigeons away. This was it. This was rock bottom. I'd stolen from a church, run away from everyone who'd ever loved me, drunk myself into oblivion, and lost everything. And the worst part? The absolute worst part was that I'd done it all to myself. My phone was dead, but I still had it in my pocket along with my wallet. I had $23 left. That was it. That was all I had to show for 28 years of life. I walked until I found a library, went inside mostly for the air conditioning, and asked if I could charge my phone. The librarian, an older black woman with glasses on a beaded chain, looked at me with something between pity and concern, but pointed me toward an outlet in the corner. While my phone charged, I sat at one of the computers and stared at the blank screen. I could look for jobs, I guess. I could figure out where the nearest homeless shelter was. I could do a lot of things. But all I really wanted to do was close my eyes and never wake up. You need help finding something? The librarian had appeared beside me, quiet as a cat. No, ma'am, I said. I'm fine. She looked at me for a long moment. You don't look fine, baby. Something about the way she said it, not judgmental, just honest, made my eyes sting. I blinked hard and looked away. There's a church 2 blocks from here, she said quietly. River of Life. They do a free lunch every day at noon and they have resources for folks who need help. Pastor Jamal's a good man. I'm not really a church person anymore, I said. Neither are most of the people who go there, she said with a small smile. That's why they fit right in. When my phone finally had enough charge to turn on, I braced myself for the messages. But there was only one new one, from a number I didn't recognize. Marcus, this is Jenny Ortiz. I don't know if you remember me. I was in youth group with you about 10 years ago. I heard you're going through a hard time. I'm in Atlanta now, and I'd really like to help if I can. No judgment. I promise. Please call me. Jenny Ortiz. The name pulled up a hazy memory. A girl a couple years younger than me. Quiet, with braces and frizzy brown hair. She'd been one of those kids who was always there but never quite fit in. I'd probably said 10 words to her in all the years we'd been in youth group together. I had no idea how she'd gotten my number or how she knew I was in Atlanta, but I was desperate enough to call her back. She answered on the second ring. Marcus? Yeah, how did you... Your mom called my mom. She's worried sick. They all are. Of course, small-town networks were faster than the FBI. Look, Jenny said, I know we weren't exactly friends back then, but I've been where you are. Maybe not the exact same place, but close enough. And I know what it's like when you think nobody can help you, that you're too far gone. You don't know anything about me, I said, but there was no heat in it. You're right, but I know about running, and I know about being scared, and I know that whatever you did, whatever happened, you don't have to do this alone. I closed my eyes. I stole from the church, Jenny, from the building fund, $3,000. Silence on the other end. long enough that I thought she'd hung up. "Okay," she finally said. "That's it? Just okay?" "What do you want me to say? It's fine? It's not fine. But it's also not the end of the world, and it's definitely not the end of God's ability to work with you. I don't even believe in God anymore." "Then it's a good thing His existence doesn't depend on your belief," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Where are you right now?" I told her about the library. She said she'd be there in 30 minutes. Jenny showed up in 25, driving a beat-up Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door. She'd changed since high school. No more braces, her hair tamed into loose curls, a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there before. She was wearing scrubs with cartoon characters on them. "You're a nurse?" I asked as I got in the car. "Pediatric nurse. I work at Children's Healthcare." She pulled into traffic. "When's the last time you ate?" I couldn't remember. She took me to a diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1975. We sat in a cracked vinyl booth, and she ordered me eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns, basically everything on the breakfast menu. I told her I couldn't pay for it. "I didn't ask you to," she said. While I ate, she talked. She told me she'd left Collinsville right after high school. Couldn't get out fast enough. She'd gone to nursing school in Atlanta. And for the first 2 years, she'd been angry at everyone back home. Angry at God. Angry at herself for wasting so much time trying to be someone she wasn't. "I was so deep in trying to prove I didn't need God that I almost died proving it," she said. "Pills, mostly. Anxiety meds I convinced a doctor I needed, then kept getting refills from different doctors. I told myself it was fine, that I was handling it right up until I took too many one night and woke up in the ER. "What changed?" I asked. She shrugged. "Lots of things. Therapy, AA meetings. Yeah, they have those for pills too. But honestly, what really changed was I stopped trying to run from God and started getting mad at Him instead." "Mad at Him?" "Yeah. I figured if He was real, He could handle my anger. And if He wasn't, then I was just yelling at the ceiling, and who cares?" She stirred her coffee. "Turns out, He was real, and He could handle it. All of it. Every bit of rage and hurt and confusion I threw at Him." I pushed my eggs around my plate. "What if I'm too far gone? What if I've done too much?" Jenny leaned forward. "Marcus, I need you to hear this. There is no too far. That's not how this works. You think you're the first person to steal? To run? To screw up so bad you can't see a way back? David killed a man to cover up an affair. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Paul murdered Christians before he became one. The whole Bible is full of people who messed up big time, and God still used them. That's different. They were people, just like you, just like me." She sat back. "Look, I'm not saying there won't be consequences. You stole money. That's real. You'll have to face that. But consequences aren't the same thing as condemnation." We sat there for a while, the diner noise washing over us, clattering dishes, conversation, the hiss of the grill. Normal life, happening all around us. "What do I do now?" I finally asked. "Well, first you need a place to stay that isn't a park bench. You can crash on my couch until we figure something out. Then we need to call Pastor Gene." "I can't." "Yes, you can. You don't want to, which I get, but you can." She pulled out her phone. "Actually, you don't have to. Because he's already on his way here." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I called him before I came to get you. He's been driving since this morning. Should be here in about..." She checked the time. 2 hours. I stood up so fast I knocked my water over. "You had no right..." "You're right. I didn't. But I did it anyway because somebody had to." She stayed calm, letting me rage. "You can run again if you want. But Marcus, how's that working out for you so far?" I stood there, shaking, wanting to bolt, wanting to scream, wanting anything except to face Pastor Gene and see the disappointment in his eyes. But I was so tired, tired of running, tired of lying, tired of being afraid. So I sat back down, and I waited for mercy to arrive. Pastor Gene walked into that diner at 4:47 p.m., looking exactly like I remembered. Gray hair, worn-out khakis, a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. But what I didn't remember, what I'd somehow forgotten, was the gentleness in his eyes. He spotted us in the booth, and I watched his face change, watched relief and sadness, and something else I couldn't name wash over his features. I wanted to look away, but forced myself not to. If I was going to face this, I was going to actually face it. He slid into the booth next to Jenny, and for a long moment, nobody said anything. The waitress came by to take his order, but he waved her off, asked for just water. "Marcus," he finally said, and his voice cracked on my name. "I'm sorry." The words came out before I could stop them. "I'm so sorry. I can't explain it. I needed the money and it was there and My throat closed up and I couldn't continue. "I know you took the money," Pastor Gene said quietly, "but that's not why I drove 4 hours to find you." I looked up at him, confused. "I came because your mother called me at 2 in the morning 3 days ago, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She was convinced you were dead somewhere. Your father hasn't slept. Your Aunt Ruth has half the prayer chain in 3 counties praying for you." He leaned forward. "The money matters, Marcus. But you matter more. I stole from you, from the church, from people who trusted. I know, and we'll deal with that. But right now, in this moment, I need you to understand something." He waited until I met his eyes. "You are not the money you took. You are not the worst thing you've ever done. You are not beyond reach. You don't know what I've done this past week. You're right, I don't. But I know who you are. I held you when you were dedicated as a baby. I watched you grow up. I saw you cry at your grandmother's funeral, and I saw you serve at the soup kitchen every Thanksgiving. One bad choice, or even a dozen bad choices, doesn't erase all of that. How can you even look at me?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "The same way God looks at me," he said simply. "The same way he looks at all of us, with eyes that see everything we are and everything we've done, and choose love anyway." Jenny excused herself, said she needed to make a phone call, but I knew she was just giving us space. The diner had started to fill up with the dinner crowd. Families, couples, people laughing and talking like the world wasn't falling apart, like redemption wasn't happening in a cracked vinyl booth in the corner. "The money's gone," I told him. "I lost it, or it got stolen. I don't even know. I got drunk and passed out in a park, and when I woke up it was just gone." Pastor Gene was quiet for a moment. "Okay? That's it? Just okay?" What else should I say? "The money's gone. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change anything between us." "It should change everything." I was getting loud enough that people were starting to look. I lowered my voice. "You should be furious. You should want me arrested. The church should—" "The church is praying for you," he interrupted. "When I told them what happened, you know what they did? They took up another collection. We raised $4,000 in 3 days. The roof's getting fixed next month." I stared at him. "Why would they—" "After what I did, because that's what the body of Christ does. We bear each other's burdens. We restore each other gently. We remember that we're all one bad day away from making choices we swore we'd never make." He took a sip of his water. "Mrs. Patterson. You remember her? Taught your 3rd grade Sunday school class? She gave $50. Said to tell you she's been praying for you every day since she heard you were struggling. Miguel Rodriguez, who you helped move last year? He gave 100 and said you were the only person who treated him like he belonged when he first started coming to church. Each name felt like a stone pressing on my chest. People I'd forgotten. People I'd written off as just part of the church machine. People who apparently hadn't written me off at all. I don't deserve that, I whispered. None of us deserve grace, Marcus. That's what makes it grace. So, what now? What, go home? Pretend this didn't happen? No. You go home and face what happened. We'll need to talk to the church board, figure out restitution. I don't have any money. I can't pay them back. Then we'll figure out a plan. You work it off, maybe. Do maintenance and repairs. It might take a year or two, but we'll figure it out together. He paused. The board will need to decide if they want to press charges. I'll advocate for you. But I can't promise anything. The fear must have shown on my face because he added quickly, Marcus, whatever happens, you don't have to face it alone. That's the point. You've been trying to handle everything by yourself. Your doubts, your struggles, your mistakes. But that's not how we're designed to live. I'm not sure I can go back. Everyone will know. Everyone will look at me like you're human? Like you're someone who messed up and needs help? Good. Let them look. He smiled sadly. Pride is what got you here in the first place. Pride that said you couldn't ask for help, couldn't admit you were struggling, couldn't let anyone see you as anything less than perfect. He wasn't wrong. I'd spent my whole life trying to be good enough for my parents, for the church, for God. And the harder I tried, the more I felt like a fraud, until finally I just stopped trying at all. What if I can't do it? I asked. What if I go back and I just fail again? Then you fail, and you get back up, and we walk with you through it. He reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. That's what covenant means, Marcus. Not that we promise to be perfect, but that we promise to stay. To not give up on each other. To keep choosing love even when it's hard. Jenny came back then, sliding into the booth beside me. Sorry, that took longer than I thought. Everything okay? Pastor Jean nodded. We're good. Marcus is coming home. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yeah, I'm coming home. We stayed at Jenny's apartment that night. Me on the couch, Pastor Jean in her spare room. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces, imagined walking back into that church, thought about standing in front of the board and confessing what I'd done. Around 2 a.m, I got up and found Pastor Jean sitting at Jenny's kitchen table, reading his Bible by the light over the stove. Can't sleep either? He asked. I shook my head and sat down across from him. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you being so nice to me? I mean, really. I stole from you. I ran away. I've spent the last year basically spitting on everything you stand for. Why not just let me go? He closed his Bible and was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick. About 15 years ago, before you would remember, I had an affair. I stared at him. Her name was Rachel. She was the youth pastor's wife. It lasted 6 months before my wife found out. He looked down at his hands. I almost lost everything. My marriage, my position, my calling. The church board wanted me gone. 70% of the congregation signed a petition demanding I resign. But you stayed? Because 30% didn't sign it. 30% said, we're hurt, we're angry, but we're not giving up on you. They held me accountable, made me go to counseling, put me on a temporary leave. But they didn't abandon me. He looked up at me. Your grandmother was one of them. My breath caught. She came to my house the day after it all came out. I thought she was there to tell me off. She had every right to. But instead she sat on my couch and said, Jean, you've made a terrible mistake. But I've known you since you were 16 years old. And this mistake isn't all you are. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through this mess together, and we're going to come out the other side." His eyes were wet now. She kept that promise. She and about 30 other people who could have walked away but didn't. "I didn't know," I whispered. "Most people don't. We like our pastors perfect." "But I'm not perfect, Marcus. I'm just a man who was shown incredible, undeserved mercy. And that mercy changed everything." He reached across the table. "So, when you ask why I drove 4 hours to find you, why I'm not giving up on you, this is why. Because someone didn't give up on me. And that's what mercy does. It keeps running. It keeps pursuing. It doesn't know how to quit." We sat there in that kitchen, two broken men held together by grace. We couldn't earn and didn't deserve. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something that wasn't shame or fear. I felt hope. Small and fragile as a candle flame. But real. We left for Collinsville at dawn, Pastor Gene driving his old pickup truck while I watched Atlanta disappear in the side mirror. With every mile, my stomach twisted tighter. By the time we crossed into Alabama, I felt like I might throw up. "You okay?" Pastor Gene asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He smiled. "That's called courage, son. It doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you keep going, even though you are." We pulled into Collinsville just after lunch. The town looked exactly the same. The water tower with the faded paint, Main Street with its antique shops and the hardware store where I used to work. The courthouse with its Confederate monument that people had been arguing about for years. Nothing had changed, except me. I had changed. Or maybe I was finally becoming who I was supposed to be all along. I didn't know yet. Pastor Gene drove past the church, and my breath caught when I saw the parking lot was full. "What's going on?" I asked. "Prayer meeting," he said. "Wednesday afternoon. We added it after you left. Bunch of folks wanted to get together and pray for you specifically." They were praying for me. Right now. While I was still covered in shame and failure, they were asking God to bring me home. And here I was. Pastor Gene drove past the church and headed toward my parents' house. "I called your mom this morning, told her we were coming. She's been cooking all morning. You know how she gets." I did know. My mom cooked when she was emotional. Happy, sad, angry, worried. Everything got processed through her kitchen. We pulled into the driveway, and before the truck even stopped, the front door flew open and my mother came running out. My dad was right behind her, moving slower, but with just as much purpose. "Marcus!" My mom reached the truck and yanked open my door before I could even unbuckle. She pulled me out and into her arms, sobbing into my shoulder. My baby. Thank God. Thank God." My dad stood a few feet back, his jaw working like he was trying not to cry. We locked eyes, and I saw everything there. Anger and relief and grief and love all mixed together. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "Dad, I'm so—" He stepped forward and wrapped both me and my mom in his arms, and we stood there in the driveway crying while Pastor Gene tactfully gave us space. When we finally went inside, the house smelled like every comfort food I'd ever loved. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, biscuits, and I could see a chocolate cake on the counter. The table was set for 4. "You didn't have to—" I started. "Yes, I did," Mom said firmly, wiping her eyes. "My son is home. Of course I cooked." We sat down to eat, and it felt surreal. Like I'd stepped into a memory, back to when things were simple. Except they'd never really been simple. I'd just been pretending they were. Halfway through the meal, my dad cleared his throat. "Son, we need to talk about what happens next." My stomach clenched. "I know. I'm ready to face whatever—" "I talked to the church board this morning," he interrupted. "Told them you were coming home. that you were ready to make things right. And he and Pastor Jean exchanged a look. And we need to have a meeting. Tomorrow night. You'll need to speak to them, confess what you did, and hear their decision about how to move forward. Will they press charges? I don't know, Dad said honestly. I'd say that's up to them. But Marcus, he reached across the table and gripped my hand. Whatever they decide, we're with you, your mom and I. We're not going anywhere. That night, lying in my old bedroom with its posters from high school still on the walls, I couldn't stop shaking. Tomorrow I'd have to face everyone. Tomorrow I'd have to own what I'd done in front of the people I'd hurt most. Tomorrow, mercy would either catch me or let me fall. I just didn't know which one I was more afraid of. The church board meeting was set for 7 o'clock Thursday evening in the conference room behind the sanctuary. I'd been in that room 100 times before, for youth group planning meetings, for mission trip preparations, for potluck dinners where Mrs. Henderson always brought her famous 7-layer dip. But walking through those doors that night felt like walking to my own execution. There were 9 people on the board, sitting around a long folding table that had seen better days. I recognized every face. Mr. Dawson, who owned the feed store and had given me my first job at 15. Mrs. Chen, who ran the church library and always saved the newest Max Lucado books for my mom. Rick Torres, the youth pastor who'd taken us all to see the Cardinals play when I was 17. Every single one of them had been part of my life in some way, and I'd stolen from all of them. Pastor Jean sat at the head of the table. My dad sat in the back corner, not on the board, just there for support. I sat in a folding chair facing everyone, feeling like I was on trial, which I guess I was. Marcus, Pastor Jean began, thank you for being here, for coming home. I know this isn't easy. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We've asked you here tonight because we need to hear from you directly. We need to understand what happened, why it happened, and what you plan to do moving forward. He paused. But before we begin, I want to make something clear to everyone in this room. This is not a witch hunt. This is not about shame. This is about restoration and accountability, both of which are necessary for healing. Mrs. Chen spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. Marcus, honey, can you tell us what happened, in your own words? I took a shaky breath. I took $3,200 from the building fund envelope in Pastor Jean's office. It was a Wednesday afternoon, about 2 weeks ago. I was alone in the building doing maintenance work, and I saw the envelope on his desk. My voice cracked. I took it, all of it, and then I ran. Why? Mr. Dawson asked. He wasn't being cruel, just direct. That was his way. I was broke, behind on rent. My truck was breaking down. I'd been fired from my job, and I couldn't... I stopped, forced myself to be honest. I was too proud to ask for help, too ashamed to admit I was failing. So when I saw that money, it felt like an answer, like maybe God was providing a way out. God doesn't provide through theft, someone muttered. I thought it was Tom Bradley, the deacon who'd never liked me much. No, he doesn't, I agreed. I know that now. I knew it then too, if I'm being honest. But I took it anyway. I convinced myself I'd pay it back, that it would just be temporary. But I knew it was wrong. What happened to the money? Rick Torres asked. I lost it. I got drunk in Atlanta, passed out in a park, and when I woke up it was gone. Either someone stole it or it fell out of my pockets. I don't know. But it's gone. I looked at each of them. I can't pay you back. Not now. I don't have anything. But I want to make this right. However long it takes. Whatever I need to do. I want to make this right. There was a long silence. Mrs. Chen was crying quietly. Mr. Dawson's face was unreadable. Tom Bradley was shaking his head like he'd expected exactly this. I think we need to discuss pressing charges, Tom said. What kind of message does it send if we just let this go? That you can steal from the church and face no consequences. I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences, Pastor Jean said carefully. But charges aren't our only option. We could require restitution community service. He stole $3,000 from a church, Tom interrupted. That's a felony in Alabama. We have a responsibility to pursue justice with mercy, Pastor Jean said, his voice firm now. The same mercy we've all needed at some point. That's different. Is it? Pastor Jean looked around the table. Is it really? Because I seem to remember when your son Jake wrecked the church van 2 years ago. Drunk, I might add. And we could have pressed charges for DUI and destruction of property. But we didn't. We made him pay for repairs and get treatment. Was that different? Tom's face reddened. That's not the same. Or when Emily Patterson stole from the offering plate when she was hooked on pills. We didn't press charges. We got her into rehab and surrounded her with support. He paused. I'm not saying what Marcus did was okay. It wasn't. But we are not a church that throws people away when they stumble. That's not who we are. The room fell silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Finally, Mrs. Chen spoke. I think we need to vote. But first, Marcus, I need to ask you something. She looked at me with those kind, steady eyes. Are you sorry because you got caught? Or are you sorry because you did it? It was the question that mattered most, and she knew it. Both, I said honestly. I'm sorry I got caught because it forced me to face what I'd done. But I'm also sorry I did it because it hurt people I care about. It betrayed trust. It made a mockery of everything I claimed to believe in. I wiped my eyes. I'm sorry because I took money that people gave sacrificially. People who can't afford to give but did anyway because they love this church. I'm sorry because I looked Pastor Jean in the eye every Friday when he paid me for work, and I was already planning to steal from him. I'm sorry because my parents have to sit in this church knowing their son is a thief. My dad made a sound in the back of the room, but I kept going. And I'm sorry because I ran instead of facing what I did. I'm sorry because I've been running from God, from faith, from everything good in my life for years now, and stealing that money was just the logical end of that road, and I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being that person. I looked at Mrs. Chen. So yeah, I'm sorry for all of it. She nodded slowly, tears running down her cheeks. Thank you for being honest. Pastor Jean cleared his throat. I'd like to make a proposal. Marcus works off the debt through labor, repairs, maintenance, whatever we need. We set up a payment plan if he gets employment. He attends counseling, both addiction counseling and spiritual direction. And he meets regularly with an accountability team to ensure he's making progress. No charges? Tom asked. No charges, but if he violates any part of the agreement, we reserve the right to reconsider. I'd like to propose an amendment, Rick Torres said. Marcus should also share his testimony publicly. Not right away, when he's ready. But I think there are other people in this church, especially young people who are struggling in silence, who need to hear that you can fall hard and still find your way back. I hadn't expected that. The idea of standing in front of the whole church and confessing what I'd done made my stomach turn. But Rick was right. How many people were sitting in those pews pretending everything was fine, hiding their struggles, thinking they were too far gone? I'll do it, I said. Whatever you need, I'll do it. Pastor Jean looked around the table. All in favor of this proposal? 6 hands went up immediately. Mrs. Chen, Rick Torres, Mr. Dawson, and 3 others I'd barely spoken to during the meeting. Opposed? 3 hands. Tom Bradley and 2 of his friends. Motion carries, Pastor Jean said quietly. Marcus, you're free to go. We'll draw up the formal agreement and have you sign it tomorrow. I stood on shaky legs. Thank you, all of you. I know I don't deserve, none of us deserve the grace we've been given. Pastor Jean interrupted. That's what makes it grace. Now go home, get some rest. Tomorrow we start the real work. My dad drove me home in silence. When we pulled into the driveway, he finally spoke. I'm proud of you, he said. I looked at him in shock. Dad, I'm proud that you came back, that you faced them, that you told the truth. He gripped the steering wheel. I'm not proud of what you did, but I'm proud of who you're choosing to become. That night I couldn't sleep again, but this time it wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was something else, something that felt almost like peace, though I wasn't ready to call it that yet. Around midnight, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. Come in, I called. My mom pushed the door open, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She handed me one and sat on the edge of my bed, like she used to when I was a kid and couldn't sleep. Can't shut your brain off? She asked. Something like that. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping our drinks. Marcus, she finally said, I need you to know something. These past 2 weeks were the worst of my life. Not knowing where you were, if you were safe, if you were... Her voice broke. I prayed more in those 2 weeks than I have in my entire life. Begged God to bring you home. I'm sorry, Mom. Let me finish. She set her mug down. I prayed and prayed, and sometimes it felt like God wasn't listening. Like my prayers were just bouncing off the ceiling. And then Jenny called, and Pastor Jean found you, and you came home. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. And I realized God was listening the whole time. He was already moving before I even started praying. He'd already put people in place to bring you back. Jenny said something like that, about God's love being like an ocean. Your grandmother used to say that, Mom said with a sad smile. She was right. You can run from it, but it just keeps coming. I don't know if I believe all that yet, I admitted. About God, about faith. I want to, but I don't know. That's okay. Faith isn't a light switch, honey. It's not all or nothing. You can believe and doubt at the same time. You can be angry with God and still be seeking Him. She squeezed my hand. The important thing is you're here. You're not running anymore. That's enough for now. The next morning, I started my first day of work at the church. The roof wouldn't need repairs for a few more weeks, so Pastor Jean had me start with the easier projects. Painting the fellowship hall, fixing broken pews, replacing burned-out lights. I was up on a ladder replacing a bulb in the sanctuary when Mrs. Patterson shuffled in. She had to be pushing 80 now, bent with arthritis, but her eyes were sharp as ever. Marcus Webb, she said, looking up at me. You get down from there and give an old woman a hug. I climbed down, and she pulled me into a fierce embrace despite being half my size. I've been praying for you every single day, she said. Every morning at 5:30 before my coffee, I've been asking God to protect you and bring you home. And here you are. I heard you gave money for the building fund. After what I did, what you did doesn't change who you are, she said firmly. You're the boy who helped carry my groceries when I couldn't manage them myself. You're the young man who sat with me at Harold's funeral when half the church had to leave early. You're Linda and Ron's son, and you're God's child. One mistake doesn't erase all that. It was a pretty big mistake. And you're making it right. That's what matters. She patted my arm. You know what I learned in 82 years? We all fall down. Every single one of us. The only difference between the righteous and the wicked is the righteous get back up. She shuffled away, leaving me standing there with tears in my eyes and a light bulb in my hand. Over the next few days, more people came by, some to check on me, some to offer words of encouragement, a few to make sure I understood the gravity of what I'd done. Miguel Rodriguez brought me lunch one afternoon. Tamales his wife had made. We ate together in the fellowship hall, and he told me about his own struggles, about coming to this country with nothing, about the shame of needing help. "The hardest thing I ever did was walk through those church doors the first time," he said. "I thought they would judge me. Some did. But most just saw a person who needed love, same as they do." Emily Patterson stopped by too. Mrs. Patterson's niece, the one who'd stolen from the offering plate years ago. She was clean now, 3 years sober, working as a receptionist at the doctor's office. "It gets easier," she told me. "Not easy, but easier. The shame doesn't go away all at once, but one day you'll realize you've gone a whole hour without thinking about it, then a whole day, and slowly you become someone new. Not perfect, just new." By the end of the first week, I'd started meeting with a counselor Pastor Jean recommended. Her name was Dr. Williams, and she didn't let me get away with anything. "You stole money, but that's not your real problem," she said during our second session. "Your real problem is you've spent your whole life running from yourself, from your doubts, your questions, your humanity. You tried to be perfect, failed, and decided if you couldn't be perfect, you might as well be nothing. That's not, isn't it?" She leaned back in her chair. "You said you stopped going to church because you couldn't ask questions. You said you drank to quiet the noise in your head. You said you stole the money because you were too proud to ask for help. What's the common thread?" I sat with that for a long moment. I was afraid to be real. "Bingo," she smiled. "The good news? You're being real now. You're facing the mess. You're letting people see you at your worst. That takes more courage than pretending to be perfect ever did." That Sunday, I went to church for the first time in over a year. I sat in the back row, ready to bolt if I needed to. Pastor Jean preached on the prodigal son, which felt a little on the nose, but also exactly right. The father in this story doesn't wait for the son to clean himself up, Pastor Jean said. He doesn't make him earn his way back. He sees him while he's still far off and runs to meet him. That's the heart of God, friends. He doesn't wait for us to get our act together. He runs toward us while we're still covered in pig slop and shame. After the service, at least 20 people came up to hug me, to tell me they were glad I was home, to promise they were praying for me. A few avoided me. I saw Tom Bradley and his wife leave through a side door rather than walk past me. But most people chose love. That afternoon, Jenny drove down from Atlanta to check on me. We sat on my parents' back porch, drinking sweet tea while she told me about her week at the hospital. "How are you really doing?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Some moments I feel like maybe I can do this, like maybe I can build something good out of this wreckage. And then other moments I feel like I'm drowning, like the weight of what I did is going to crush me." "Yeah, that sounds about right." She set down her glass. "You know what helped me? When I finally stopped trying to outrun my past and started carrying it instead. Not as a burden I deserved, but as a story that could help someone else. Rick Torres said something like that I should share my testimony. You should, when you're ready." She smiled. "There's someone sitting in a church somewhere right now who feels exactly like you did. Lost, ashamed, too far gone to save, and they need to hear that they're wrong. That mercy runs faster than sin ever could." I thought about that a lot over the next few weeks as I worked on the church, as I met with Dr. Williams, as I slowly started to rebuild my life. The church board had set up a payment plan, $200 a month once I found a job, plus 20 hours a week of labor until the debt was paid. It would take me years, maybe the rest of my life, but I had years now. I had a life now. I'd almost thrown it all away, but mercy had caught me first. One evening, about a month after I came home, I was cleaning out the gutters on the church roof when I heard someone call my name. I looked down and saw Pastor Gene standing in the parking lot. "Come down here for a minute," he called. I climbed down the ladder, expecting another project. Instead, he handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a job application for the church groundskeeper position, full-time, with benefits. The salary was modest, but fair, enough to live on, enough to make payments on my debt. "We had to let Jerry go," Pastor Gene explained. Jerry was the old groundskeeper who'd been threatening to retire for 5 years. He finally decided to spend more time with his grandkids. The board voted to offer you the position, if you want it. You trust me with this, after everything? "Marcus, you've been working here for a month. You show up early, you work hard, you do quality work. Why wouldn't I trust you?" He paused. "Besides, I don't believe in wasting a crisis. God's been doing something in you these past weeks. I want to see where it leads." I took the job. 3 months later, standing on that same roof replacing shingles, I realized something had changed. The shame was still there. Probably always would be, to some degree. But it wasn't crushing me anymore. It was just part of my story now, part of who I was becoming. That night at dinner, my mom asked how work had gone. "Good," I said, and I meant it. My dad reached across the table and squeezed my shoulder, and no words were needed. I was home. Really home. Not because I'd earned it, but because mercy had run faster than my sin ever could. And that, I was finally beginning to understand, was the whole point. 6 months into my job as church groundskeeper, I got a phone call that almost made me quit. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was mowing the lawn around the fellowship hall when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Is this Marcus Webb?" A woman's voice, professional and cold. "Yeah, that's me. This is Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News. We're doing a story on church financial misconduct in small towns across Alabama, and your name came up in our investigation. I'd like to ask you some questions about the theft that occurred at Hillcrest Baptist Church last year." My blood went cold. "What?" "We received an anonymous tip about your case. According to our source, the church chose not to press charges despite evidence of theft exceeding $3,000. We're wondering if there might be a pattern of covering up financial crimes in religious institutions." "No," I interrupted. "No, that's not what happened at all." "So you're admitting to the theft?" I realized too late what I'd done. Look, I can't talk about this. We're running the story this Friday at 6. If you'd like to provide your side." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone in the grass. This was it. This was the other shoe dropping. I'd gotten too comfortable thinking maybe I could move past this, maybe rebuild a life. But now the whole state was about to know what I'd done. My parents would be humiliated. The church would be dragged through the mud. Everything Pastor Gene had done to protect me would be for nothing. I left the mower running in the middle of the lawn and went to find Pastor Gene. He was in his office, working on Sunday's sermon. "We've got a problem," I said, and told him about the call. He was quiet for a long moment, then picked up his phone and made a call. "Tom, it's Gene. We need an emergency board meeting. Tonight. I'll explain when you get here." By 7 o'clock that evening, the board was assembled. I stood in front of them again, but this time the fear was different. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about what this would do to them. "A news station is going to run a story about the theft," Pastor Gene explained. "They're framing it as a church cover-up." Tom Bradley looked vindicated. "I told you we should have pressed charges. Now it looks like we're hiding something." "We're not hiding anything," Pastor Gene said firmly. "We made a decision to pursue restoration over punishment. That's not a cover-up, that's mercy." The public won't see it that way, Tom said. They'll think we're protecting criminals. So what do we do? Mrs. Chen asked. Do we give them a statement? I have an idea, Rick Torres said. What if Marcus talks to them? Not to defend himself, but to tell his actual story. What happened, how the church responded, what restoration looks like. Everyone turned to look at me. I can't, I said immediately. If I go on TV and talk about this, you'll be doing what you should have done months ago, Rick interrupted. You'll be showing people what real repentance looks like, what real grace looks like. The world needs to see that. He's right, Pastor Jean said. We can issue statements all day, but nothing speaks louder than a changed life. Your story, the real story, not some sanitized version, could do more good than you realize. I thought about Jenny's words months ago, about someone sitting in a church somewhere who needed to hear they weren't too far gone. But this was different. This wasn't sharing my testimony with a church congregation. This was millions of people across Alabama seeing my face, hearing about my lowest moment. What if I make it worse? I asked. What if you make it better? Pastor Jean countered. I called the reporter back that night. Told her I'd agree to an interview, but only if they let me tell the whole story. She agreed. The interview was scheduled for Thursday afternoon in the church parking lot. They wanted the building in the background for context. I barely slept Wednesday night. Thursday morning, Dr. Williams called me. Someone must have told her what was happening. How are you doing? She asked. Terrified. Good. That means you're taking it seriously. I could hear her smile through the phone. Marcus, remember what we talked about. Shame thrives in darkness. The more you bring your story into the light, the less power it has over you. This is a lot of light. Yes, it is. But you can handle it. You've already handled the hardest part, coming back and facing what you did. This is just telling people about it. The news crew showed up at 2 o'clock. 3 people. The reporter, Jennifer Martinez, a camera operator, and someone with sound equipment. Jennifer was younger than she'd sounded on the phone, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She shook my hand. Thanks for agreeing to this. I'm not sure I had a choice. You always have a choice, she said. Not unkindly, just stating a fact. They set up the shot with me standing in front of the church, the white steeple visible over my shoulder. Jennifer asked if I was ready. I nodded, even though I wasn't. Marcus Webb, thank you for speaking with us. Can you tell us in your own words what happened last year? I took a breath. I stole $3,200 from Hillcrest Baptist Church. Money that was meant for building repairs. I took it because I was desperate and proud and too ashamed to ask for help. Then, I ran away. And the church chose not to press charges. Why do you think that is? Because they believe in restoration over retribution. Because they understood that I was more than the worst thing I'd ever done. Because they'd rather help me become someone new than punish me for who I'd been. Some people might say that's letting you off easy, that there should be consequences for theft. There were consequences, I said. I'm paying back every penny through labor and monthly payments. It'll take me years. I'm in counseling. I meet with an accountability team. I have to live with what I did. And that's not easy. I paused. But they didn't give up on me. And that made all the difference. What would you say to people who think the church should have handled this differently? I looked directly at the camera. I'd say, I understand why they feel that way. I broke the law. I betrayed trust. And I deserve to face consequences for that. But I'd also ask them to think about what they really want our justice system to be about. Is it just about punishment? Or is there room for restoration? For second chances? For people to become better than they were? Jennifer asked a few more questions, but that was the soundbite they used. That night, my face was on the 6 o'clock news. The story ran for about 3 minutes, showing the church, showing me, showing Pastor Jean explaining their decision. My phone exploded with calls and texts, some supportive, some angry. One message called me a thief who should be in jail. Another said my story had given them hope. A woman I didn't know left a voicemail saying her son was in prison and she'd been so angry at him, but seeing how our church had handled my situation made her want to try forgiveness. The story went viral online. By Friday morning, it had been shared thousands of times. Comments ranged from, "This is what real Christianity looks like," to, "This is why churches can't be trusted with money." On Sunday, the church was packed. Standing room only. People had driven from other counties to see the church that had shown mercy to a thief. Pastor Jean preached on grace and justice, and how they weren't opposites but partners in redemption. After the service, a man approached me. He was maybe 45, wearing a suit that looked uncomfortable on him. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I've been stealing from my employer for 6 months. Not much, $20, $30 here and there. But I've been doing it, and I've been telling myself it doesn't matter, because they don't pay me enough anyway." He was crying now. "But seeing your story, hearing how you faced what you did, I can't keep lying to myself. I need to make it right." I gave him Pastor Jean's number and told him to call. He did. Last I heard, he'd confessed to his boss, worked out a repayment plan, and kept his job. That was the first of many. Over the next few weeks, people reached out. Some from our church, most from places I'd never heard of. People struggling with addiction, with debt, with shame they couldn't name. People who'd given up on faith because they thought they were too far gone. People who needed to hear that mercy was real. 3 months after the interview aired, Rick Torres approached me after Wednesday night service. "I think it's time," he said. "Time for what?" "Your testimony. You need to share it with the church. The full story." My stomach twisted. "Rick, I don't know." "You just told it to thousands of people on TV. You can tell it to the people who already love you." He had a point. Pastor Jean agreed, and we scheduled it for a Sunday evening in April, almost exactly 1 year after I'd stolen the money. I worked on what I'd say for weeks, writing and rewriting, trying to find the right words. The night came too quickly. The sanctuary was full, not just regular members, but people from other churches who'd heard about what was happening. I saw Jenny sitting in the third row, giving me a thumbs up. My parents were in their usual spot, my mom already dabbing at her eyes. I walked to the front, my notes trembling in my hands. Pastor Jean introduced me briefly, then stepped aside. "My name is Marcus Webb," I began. "And a year ago, I was a thief and a drunk who'd hit rock bottom in a park in Atlanta. Tonight, I'm standing here as a man who's being slowly transformed by a grace I don't deserve and didn't earn." I told them everything. About growing up in church, but never really knowing God. About my questions and doubts that I was too afraid to voice. About the drinking, the job loss, the desperation. About standing in Pastor Jean's office and making the choice that almost destroyed my life. "I thought I was running from consequences," I said. "From judgment. From people finding out who I really was. But what I was really running from was love. Because love requires honesty. And I'd been lying to myself for so long I didn't even know who I was anymore." I talked about Jenny finding me, about Pastor Jean driving 4 hours to Atlanta, about coming home and facing the board, about the months of work and counseling and slowly learning to live without shame as my constant companion. "I can't tell you there was one moment where everything changed," I said. There wasn't. It's been 1,000 small moments. 1,000 choices to get back up, to be honest, to accept help even when I didn't think I deserved it. I looked at Pastor Jean. And 1,000 times when someone chose to see who I could become instead of just who I was. My voice broke and I had to pause. I ran from church, from faith, from everything holy. I ran as fast and as far as I could, but mercy ran faster. It always does. And the thing about mercy is, it doesn't just catch you, it carries you all the way home. The sanctuary was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room was on their feet, applauding, crying, worshiping. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at the cross hanging behind the baptistry. The same cross I'd seen every Sunday growing up and somehow never really seen at all. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant. It meant someone had run after me long before I ever ran away. After the service, the line of people waiting to talk to me stretched out the door. Some wanted to share their own stories. Some just wanted to say thank you. One young woman, maybe 22, gripped my hands and said, "I was planning to leave tonight. I had my bags packed, was going to disappear because I couldn't face what I'd done. But if God could chase you down, maybe He's chasing me too." I gave her Pastor Jean's number and told her to call him. She did. She's still here, still healing, still letting mercy carry her. That night, driving home with my parents, I felt different, lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I'd forgotten it was there, and someone had finally helped me set it down. "I'm proud of you," my dad said for the second time in a year. This time, I believed him. When we got home, my mom made hot chocolate, our tradition now, and we sat on the back porch, watching fireflies blink in the darkness. "You know what your grandmother used to say?" my mom asked. "That God's love is like the ocean?" "That too, but also," she smiled, "she used to say that God doesn't waste our wounds. He uses them to heal other people." I thought about the man who'd stopped stealing from his employer, about the young woman who'd unpacked her bags, about all the messages I'd gotten from people who said my story had given them hope. Maybe Grandma was right. Maybe nothing was wasted after all. The fireflies kept blinking, on and off, light in the darkness, just like mercy, just like grace, just like the God who'd been chasing me all along, even when I didn't know I wanted to be caught, especially then. 2 years after I stole that money, I got a call from a prison. I was replacing fence posts behind the church on a sweltering July afternoon when my phone rang. The voice on the other end was automated, explaining that an inmate at Kilby Correctional Facility was trying to reach me. Did I accept the charges? I almost said no. I didn't know anyone in prison, didn't want to get tangled up in whatever this was, but something made me press one to accept. "Hello?" A man's voice, rough and uncertain. "Is this Marcus Webb?" "Yeah, that's me. Who is this?" "My name's Derek Lawson. You don't know me, but He paused, and I could hear other voices in the background, the echo that comes with concrete walls. "I saw your interview on the news. Someone recorded it, and it made the rounds in here. And I needed to talk to you." "Okay," I said slowly. "What about?" "I'm in here for armed robbery. Held up 3 convenience stores over 6 months. Got caught on the last one." His voice cracked. "I grew up in church, man. Like you. My dad was a deacon. I sang in the choir. But I got into drugs and everything went to hell. And now I'm looking at 8 more years." I sat down on the ground, my back against the fence I'd been fixing. "I'm sorry. That's rough. I've been so angry. At myself, at God, at everyone. Thinking I'm too far gone, you know? Like I made my choices and now I just have to live with them forever." He was crying now. "But then I heard your story about how your church didn't give up on you, how they chose mercy. And I thought, man, If there's mercy for someone who stole from a church, maybe there's mercy for me too. We talked for 30 minutes until his phone time ran out. He called again a week later, then again a week after that. Over the next few months, Derek and I became unlikely friends. I sent him books Pastor Gene recommended. I put money in his commissary account so he could buy better food. And I visited him once a month, driving the 2 hours to Kilby to sit across from him in the visiting room. "Why are you doing this?" he asked during one visit. "You don't even know me." "Because someone did it for me," I said simply. "And because mercy isn't mercy if you keep it to yourself." Derek started going to the prison chapel, started reading his Bible again, started believing that maybe his story wasn't over, that maybe God could still use a broken man in an orange jumpsuit. "I'm not going to lie," he told me 6 months into our friendship. "I'm still angry sometimes, still scared about what happens when I get out, but I'm not hopeless anymore. That's something." Around the same time Derek and I were meeting, something else started happening at Hillcrest Baptist. People started showing up who didn't fit the usual profile. Men fresh out of rehab, women escaping abusive relationships, families whose power had been shut off, teenagers who'd been kicked out by their parents. They'd heard about the church that believed in second chances, and they wanted in. Not everyone was happy about it. Tom Bradley and a few others complained that the church was becoming too worldly, that we needed to maintain standards. "We do have standards," Pastor Gene said during one particularly heated board meeting. "Love God, love people. Everything else is just details." "But these people," Tom gestured vaguely, "half of them aren't even Christians. They're just here for the free food, the help with rent." "Probably," Pastor Gene agreed. "And that's fine. Jesus spent most of his time with people who weren't religious. He fed them, healed them, loved them. He didn't make them pass a theology test first." The church split over it, actually. About 30 people left, Tom Bradley among them. They started attending a church 2 towns over that was more biblical, which apparently meant less welcoming of broken people. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. But Pastor Gene reminded me that Jesus lost followers too, and he was perfect. Sometimes the cost of mercy is that not everyone will understand it. The people who stayed, they went all in. We started a recovery ministry that met Tuesday nights in the fellowship hall, AA and NA meetings, with a Bible study afterward for anyone who wanted to stay. We started a food pantry that was open 3 days a week. We started a job training program, teaching basic skills like resume writing and interview prep. And somewhere in all of that, without anyone really planning it, I became the person running most of these programs. "You're good at this," Pastor Gene told me one Wednesday evening after a particularly full recovery meeting. "Have you ever thought about going to school for ministry?" "I barely graduated high school," I said, "and I'm still paying off my debt to the church. I can't afford college." "There are ways," he said. "Online programs, scholarships. We could work it out if you wanted to." I thought about it for weeks. The idea of being in ministry felt presumptuous. Who was I to lead people spiritually? I was still figuring out my own faith, still wrestling with doubt more often than I wanted to admit. But I kept thinking about Derek, about the young woman who'd unpacked her bags, about the dozen people who showed up every Tuesday night, desperate for hope. They didn't need someone who had all the answers. They needed someone who'd been in the pit and found a way out. Maybe I could be that. I enrolled in an online ministry program through a Christian university that offered scholarships for people in church service. It was slow going, 1 or 2 classes a semester while working full time. But I was learning, growing, starting to understand that faith wasn't about having all the answers. It was about showing up, even when you didn't. One Tuesday night, about 3 years after I'd come home, a woman walked into our recovery meeting who changed everything. Her name was Sarah, and I know I said I'd avoid that name, but That's what she actually went by, and she was a mess. Skinny in that way that says drugs, not diet. Track marks on her arms. Eyes that had seen too much. She sat in the back corner, arms crossed, radiating hostility. After the meeting, while everyone else was getting coffee and cookies, I approached her. "I'm Marcus," I said. "Glad you came tonight." "I didn't come for you," she said. "Court ordered. Part of my probation." "That's fine. Doesn't matter why you're here. Just matters that you are." She looked at me like I was stupid. "You don't know me. Don't pretend like you care." "You're right. I don't know you. But I know what it's like to hit bottom. And I know what it's like when someone shows up anyway." Over the next few weeks, Sarah kept coming. She never participated, never shared, just sat in her corner with her arms crossed. But she kept showing up, and that was enough. Then one night, about a month in, she raised her hand during sharing time. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice shaking, "and I'm an addict. Crystal meth mostly. Been using for 6 years. Lost my kids, my job, my apartment, everything." She wiped her eyes. "And I don't know if I can do this. Get clean, I mean. I've tried before and I always go back. Always." "That's why you don't do it alone," I said. "That's the whole point of this. You can't do it alone. None of us can." After the meeting, she approached me. "You said you hit bottom. What did that look like for you?" I told her my story, not the sanitized version, the real one. The drinking, the theft, the night I woke up on a park bench with everything gone. "How'd you get out?" she asked. "Someone came after me. And then I had to choose to let them help me." "I don't know if I can do that. Trust people." I didn't either. But I was more scared of staying where I was than I was of asking for help. Sarah started coming to more than just Tuesday meetings. She showed up for Sunday services sitting in the back row like I used to. She came to the food pantry on Thursdays. Slowly, carefully, she started letting people in. I connected her with a woman in the church who ran a recovery house for women. She moved in, started going to daily meetings, started rebuilding her life, one painful day at a time. 3 months later, she relapsed. I got the call at midnight. She was in the ER, overdose, barely made it. I drove to the hospital and sat with her until dawn. When she woke up, she couldn't look at me. "I failed," she whispered. "No, you fell. There's a difference." Same thing. It's not. Failing means you gave up. Falling means you're still learning to walk. I gripped her hand. "You're not done yet, Sarah. This isn't over." She went back to the recovery house, went back to meetings, kept trying. And 6 months later, she celebrated her first full year of sobriety. She stood up in front of our Tuesday night group, holding her coin, crying and laughing at the same time. "I didn't think I could do this," she said. "I've been using since I was 17. I've been to rehab 4 times. I've lost everything that mattered. But I'm here. I'm clean. And it's because people in this room wouldn't let me give up on myself." She looked at me. "Marcus told me that mercy keeps running, that it doesn't quit." I didn't believe him, but he was right. After the meeting, Pastor Jean pulled me aside. "You know what you're doing here is ministry, right? This is what it looks like. Not preaching on Sundays, though that matters too, but this, showing up in hospital rooms at midnight, sitting with people in their mess, choosing to run after them when they run away. That's the gospel." I thought about that a lot, about how far I'd come from the guy who stole church money and ran, about how I'd spent so much of my life thinking faith meant having all the answers, being perfect, never struggling. And now I was learning that real faith looked like showing up for people, letting them see your scars and saying, "Me too." Around this time, my parents started asking about my personal life. Specifically, why I wasn't dating anyone. I'm focused on work and school, I said. You're 32 years old, my mom pointed out. You can focus on work and still have a life. The truth was, I'd been on a few dates over the past couple years. Nothing serious. Part of it was I was busy. But part of it was I was scared. Scared that once someone really knew me, knew what I'd done, who I'd been, they'd leave. Better to not try than to try and fail. Dr. Williams, my counselor, called me out on it immediately. You're doing the same thing you did before, she said. Hiding, just in a different way. Before you hid behind perfection. Now you're hiding behind your past. I'm not hiding. You're absolutely hiding. You're using your story as a shield. I'm the guy who messed up, so I don't deserve good things. That's just pride in a different costume. How is that pride? Because you're still making it all about you. About what you deserve, what you've earned, what you're worthy of. She leaned forward. Newsflash. None of us deserve good things. We get them anyway. That's called grace. And you can't preach grace to everyone else while refusing to accept it for yourself. She had a point, even if I didn't want to admit it. A month later, I met Amy Chen at a church barbecue. She was Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, visiting from Nashville where she worked as a social worker. We ended up talking for 2 hours about her work with foster kids and my work with the recovery ministry. You should come to Nashville, she said. We have a huge population of people struggling with addiction. You could make a real difference. I can't leave Collinsville. I'm still paying off my debt and my work here. I'm not saying leave permanently. Just visit, see what we're doing. She smiled. And maybe have dinner with me while you're there. I drove to Nashville 3 weeks later, supposedly to learn about their recovery programs. Really, to see Amy. We had dinner at a Thai restaurant downtown, and she told me about her work, about the kids she was trying to help, about how hard it was to see families broken by addiction and poverty and abuse. Why do you do it? I asked. If it's so hard? Because someone has to, and because I believe people can change, even when they don't believe it themselves. She looked at me, kind of like what you do. We started dating long distance. She'd drive down to Collinsville every few weeks, or I'd go up to Nashville. She met my parents, came to my Tuesday night meetings, sat through my clumsy attempts at preaching, when Pastor Gene let me give a sermon. 6 months in, I told her everything. The whole story, not just the sanitized version I shared in my testimony, but the ugly parts too. The depth of my drinking, the things I'd done while drunk that I was ashamed of, the desperation that had driven me to steal. Thanks for trusting me with that, she said when I finished. You're not, I don't know, bothered by it? Marcus, I work with teenagers who've been through hell. I've seen every kind of trauma, every kind of mistake. You think your story scares me? She took my hand. What matters isn't where you've been. It's where you're going. And I like where you're going. That was the moment I knew I loved her. But I also knew I couldn't ask her to build a life with someone who was still carrying debt, still figuring out his faith, still learning how to be a person. She deserved better than that. You're doing it again, Dr. Williams said when I told her. Deciding you're not good enough. Amy's a grown woman. Let her make her own choices. What if I mess it up? What if I hurt her? What if you don't? What if this is exactly what God has for you, and you miss it because you're too scared to try? That night, I called Amy and told her I loved her. She said she loved me too. And for the first time in my life, I let myself believe that maybe I could have something good. Not because I deserved it, but because mercy had caught me and wasn't letting go. Even when I tried to run from good things, mercy ran faster. 4 years after I came home, I made my final payment to the church. It was a Thursday afternoon in October, and I walked into Pastor Jean's office with a check for $200, the last installment on a debt that had defined half a decade of my life. My hands weren't shaking this time. I wasn't afraid. I was just ready to be done. Pastor Jean took the check and held it for a long moment, not looking at it, just looking at me. "You know what this represents?" he asked. "That I'm finally paid up?" "No," he smiled. "It represents a man who chose the hard road when the easy road would have been to keep running. It represents faithfulness over years, not just days. It represents who you've become." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder I'd never seen before. Inside were copies of every check I'd ever written, every hour of work I'd logged, every meeting I'd attended. A complete record of my restoration. "This is yours," he said, handing me the folder. "So you never forget what God did in you. Not the stealing. That's part of it. But it's not the whole story. The whole story is that you came back. And you kept coming back. Day after day. Month after month. That's the miracle." I looked through the pages. 4 years of my life documented in neat rows. 4 years of showing up, of doing the work, of slowly becoming someone I didn't hate when I looked in the mirror. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now, you keep doing what you're doing. Keep running the recovery ministry. Keep counseling people who think they're too far gone. Keep being proof that mercy is real." He paused. "And if you're open to it, I'd like to talk to you about joining our staff full-time." I stared at him. "As what?" "Associate pastor, recovery and outreach." He leaned back in his chair. "You're already doing the job, Marcus. You're 1 semester away from finishing your degree. The board voted last week, unanimously, by the way. Tom Bradley's gone. And the people who are left, they see what God's doing through you. They want you on staff. I don't know if I'm ready. Nobody's ever ready. But you're called. That's different." I called Amy that night to tell her. She screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Marcus, this is incredible. When do you start?" "January, after I finish my last class. But Amy," I hesitated. "The salary's not great. It's a small church in a small town. If you and I are going to..." "Are you trying to ask me something?" "I'm trying to figure out if I can ask you something. If it's fair to ask you to move here, to make less money than you could in Nashville. Marcus Webb, if you're about to propose to me over the phone, I'm going to be very upset." I laughed. "No, I'm not that clueless. But I needed to know if it was even worth asking. If you'd ever consider..." "Yes." I didn't finish the question. "I don't need you to. Yes, I'd move to Collinsville. Yes, I'd marry you. Yes to all of it." She was crying now. "Do you know how rare it is to find someone who actually lives what they believe? Who shows up for broken people because someone showed up for them? I don't care about the money, Marcus. I care about you." I proposed on Christmas Eve during the candlelight service at Hillcrest Baptist. It wasn't planned. I'd been going to wait until dinner afterward. But we were standing there singing Silent Night, and the church was full of people whose lives had been touched by mercy. Derek, on parole now and sitting with his parents who'd driven down from Birmingham. Sarah, 18 months sober, and holding hands with her daughter who'd been returned to her custody. Miguel Rodriguez and his growing family. Emily Patterson teaching Sunday school. Mrs. Patterson crying happy tears in the front row like she did every Christmas. And I looked at Amy, her face lit by candlelight. And I thought about how I'd almost missed all of this. How I'd almost stayed in that park in Atlanta, drunk and lost and convinced I was beyond saving. How mercy had run after me anyway. I knelt down right there in the middle of the service. People noticed and the singing faltered. Amy looked down at me, confused, then shocked, then crying. "I don't have a fancy speech," I said, "but I love you. and I want to spend the rest of my life running after people the way you've run after me. Will you marry me?" She said yes. The whole church erupted in applause. Pastor Jean had to pause the service for 5 minutes while people hugged us and cried and celebrated. My mom was sobbing so hard, my dad had to give her his handkerchief. "My baby," she kept saying. "My baby's getting married." We got married in May at Hillcrest Baptist with half the town in attendance. Jenny was Amy's maid of honor. She'd driven down from Atlanta, where she was now a nurse practitioner. Derek was there in a suit that didn't quite fit, crying through the whole ceremony. Sarah brought her daughter and her son, both back with her now, both shy but smiling. Pastor Jean performed the ceremony. When he got to the vows, he paused and looked at both of us. "Marriage is a covenant," he said, "not a contract. A contract says, 'I'll love you if you love me back.' A covenant says, 'I'll love you no matter what.' It's choosing to stay even when staying is hard. It's choosing to run toward each other instead of away." He smiled. "It's mercy in action." Amy and I honeymooned in the mountains of Tennessee. Nothing fancy, just a cabin and hiking trails and time to be together. On our last morning there, we sat on the porch watching the sunrise, and Amy asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you ever think about going back?" she asked. "Going back where?" "To that park in Atlanta, where you hit bottom." I was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes. Not because I want to. Just to remind myself how far I've come." "Why?" "Because I think we should go. Together." She took my hand. "I want to see where your story turned around. Where mercy caught you." So we did. On our way home, we drove through Atlanta, and I found the park. It looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less threatening. Just a regular city park with regular people walking their dogs and pushing strollers. We sat on what I thought was the same bench, though I couldn't be sure. "This is where I woke up," I told her. "Where I realized the money was gone and I had nothing left." And that's when Jenny called. The next day, at the library, I looked around. I've tried to remember what I was thinking that morning. If I prayed, if I cried, if I felt anything. But mostly I just remember feeling empty, like I'd finally become the person I'd always been afraid I was. Amy was quiet, then said, "Can I pray?" We bowed our heads right there on that park bench, and Amy thanked God for bringing me to that place. Not because it was good, but because it was necessary. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to realize you never had what mattered to begin with. "Thank you for not giving up on him," she prayed. "Thank you for sending Jenny and Pastor Jean and everyone who ran after him. And thank you for letting me be part of his story now. Help us to run after others the way you ran after him." When we opened our eyes, a homeless man was sitting on the bench across from us, watching. He looked a lot like I probably had that morning. Dirty clothes, hollow eyes, carrying everything he owned in a backpack. "You folks okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Actually, we're better than okay. You need anything? Food? Water?" I could eat. We walked with him to a McDonald's, bought him lunch, and sat with him while he ate. His name was Marcus, same as mine, and he'd been on the streets for 3 years after losing his construction job. "Any family?" Amy asked. "A sister in Texas, but I haven't talked to her in years. Too ashamed, of what I've become." I told him my story, not the short version, the real one. He listened, eating his burger, occasionally nodding like he understood exactly what I meant. When I finished, he was crying. "You think there's hope for someone like me?" "I know there is," I said, "because there was hope for someone like me." We got his sister's contact information, called her, right there in the McDonald's. She answered on the second ring, and when Marcus said, "Lisa, it's me," she started sobbing. They talked for 20 minutes while Amy and I sat quietly, watching Mercy work in real time. Before we left, I gave Marcus my phone number and the address of a men's shelter I knew about. "Call me," I said, "even if you don't go to the shelter. Even if you just need to talk. Call me." He did call, 3 days later. Said he'd gone to the shelter, was starting the process of getting his life back. A month after that, he called again. He'd reconnected with his sister, was moving to Texas to stay with her while he got on his feet. "You saved my life," he told me. "No," I said. "Someone saved mine, and I'm just passing it along." That became my answer to everything in the years that followed. When people thanked me for the recovery ministry, for counseling them through their darkest moments, for not giving up on them, I always said the same thing. Someone didn't give up on me. I'm just passing it along. Amy and I settled into life in Collinsville. She got a job with the county social services department, working with families in crisis. Together, we bought a small house 3 blocks from the church. Nothing fancy, but ours. We started hosting Tuesday night meetings in our living room for people who wanted extra support. We had people over for dinner constantly. Recovering addicts, ex-cons, people fresh out of rehab, families struggling to make ends meet. Our house became what Pastor Gene's house had been for me. A place where mercy lived in practical terms, where you could show up broken and leave a little less broken. 2 years into our marriage, Amy got pregnant. We were terrified and thrilled in equal measure. I kept thinking about my own dad, about the pressure he'd felt to raise me right, to make me into a good Christian kid, about how I'd run from all of that and nearly destroyed my life in the process. "What if I mess this up?" I asked Dr. Williams during one of our now infrequent sessions. I still saw her once a month, just to check in. "You probably will," she said cheerfully. "All parents mess up. The question is, what do you do when you mess up? Do you hide it and pretend you're perfect? Or do you own it and show your kids that mistakes aren't the end of the world?" Our daughter was born in March, during a thunderstorm that knocked out power to half the county. We named her Ruth, after my grandmother, the woman who'd believed in Pastor Gene when everyone else wanted him gone. The woman who'd shown me that mercy wasn't just a theological concept. It was a choice you made every day. Holding Ruth in the hospital, I thought about all the choices that had led to this moment. The bad ones that nearly destroyed me. The good ones that slowly rebuilt me. The people who'd refused to give up on me even when I'd given up on myself. "I'm going to tell you everything," I whispered to her while she slept. "When you're old enough to understand. I'm going to tell you about the night I stole from a church, about the morning I woke up in a park with nothing, about how mercy ran after me. Because I don't want you to grow up thinking your dad is perfect. I want you to grow up knowing your dad is forgiven." Amy squeezed my hand. "She's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other." Ruth's dedication was at Hillcrest Baptist. With the whole church family gathered around, Pastor Gene held her. He was older now, moving slower, talking about retirement, and prayed over her the same prayer he'd prayed over me 33 years before. "Lord, we dedicate this child to you. Not because we know what her life will look like, but because we know you'll be faithful through all of it. Through the good choices and the bad ones. Through the running and the returning. Through every moment when she needs mercy to run a little faster. Keep her in your hands." Looking around that sanctuary, I saw the proof that mercy was real. Derek, now running his own recovery ministry in Birmingham, had brought a bus load of guys from his program. Sarah was there with her kids and her new husband, a good man she'd met at an AA meeting. Miguel Rodriguez had his whole extended family filling 2 pews. Emily Patterson taught the nursery where Ruth would soon spend Sunday mornings. Mrs. Patterson, 90 now and frail, sat in her wheelchair in the front row, wiping away happy tears. And Jenny, who'd driven down from Atlanta with her fiancé, sat beside my parents, grinning at me like she knew exactly what I was thinking. This was the family that Mercy had built. Not perfect people. We all had our scars, our stories, our struggles, but people who'd learned that grace wasn't something you earned. It was something you received and then passed along. After the service, Tom Bradley approached me. I hadn't seen him in years. He'd left when the church started getting too worldly, remember? But here he was, older and somehow softer looking. "Marcus," he said, extending his hand. "Congratulations on your daughter." "Thanks, Tom. It's good to see you. I owe you an apology." He looked down at his feet. "I was wrong. About you, about what the church should be, about everything. I was so focused on keeping things pure that I forgot what we're actually supposed to be doing." "What's that?" "Loving people, all people, especially the ones who've screwed up." He looked back up at me. "My son Jake died 6 months ago. Overdose. And I keep thinking, if our church had been more like what Hillcrest became, more like what you're doing, maybe he would have felt like he could ask for help. Maybe he'd still be here." I gripped his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Tom." "Me too." He wiped his eyes. "But I wanted you to know. What you're doing matters. The people you're helping, the second chances you're giving, it matters. I just wish I'd understood that sooner." We talked for a while longer, and before he left, Tom asked if he could start attending again. Pastor Gene welcomed him back the next Sunday, and Tom became one of the recovery ministry's biggest supporters. That's the thing about mercy. It doesn't just change the people who receive it. It changes everyone it touches. 5 years into my role as associate pastor, Pastor Gene announced his retirement. The church board met to discuss his replacement, and I assumed they'd bring in someone from outside. Someone with more experience, more education, fewer mistakes in their past. Instead, they offered me the job. "I can't be the lead pastor," I told the board. "I'm not qualified." "You're the most qualified person we know," Mrs. Chen interrupted. "Not because you have the most degrees or the cleanest record, but because you understand what this church is supposed to be. You've lived it." The vote was unanimous. I called Amy from the church parking lot, crying too hard to get the words out at first. "They want me to be the pastor," I finally managed. "The actual pastor." "Of course they do," she said, laughing. "Who else would it be?" That night, I sat in my backyard watching Ruth play on her swing set, thinking about the impossible journey that had brought me here. From thief to pastor. From running away to running toward. From being chased by shame to being carried by grace. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "My name is Jason. I saw your testimony online. I just stole money from my employer, and I'm about to run. Can you help me?" I smiled and typed back, "Yes. Let's talk. Where are you?" Because that's what mercy does. It keeps running. It keeps pursuing. It never gets tired, never gives up, never stops believing that broken people can become whole. And after everything I'd been through, everything I'd learned, I knew one thing for certain. No matter how fast you run, no matter how far you go, mercy runs faster. It always has. It always will. 10 years after I stole that money, I stood in the parking lot of a church in Atlanta. Not the one I'd stolen from, but one that had reached out after seeing my story. They wanted me to speak at their men's conference about redemption and second chances. I almost said no. A decade had passed, and sometimes it felt like that night belonged to a different person entirely. I had a wife, a daughter, a church I was pastoring. I'd written a book about my experience that had somehow found its way into prisons and rehab centers across the country. My life looked nothing like it had that morning I woke up on a park bench. But Amy convinced me to go. "Someone there needs to hear this," she'd said. "Someone is sitting right where you were, thinking they're too far gone. You have to tell them they're wrong. So here I was, in a hotel conference room with 300 men, about to share the story I'd told 100 times before, except this time felt different. This time, standing at that podium looking out at all those faces, I realized something I'd never quite understood before. This story was never really about me. No, my name is Marcus Webb, I began, and 10 years ago I was a thief and a drunk who'd hit rock bottom in this city. Tonight, break time, I'm standing here as living proof that no one is beyond the reach of grace. I told them everything, every detail I've shared with you and then some. I told them about the shame that had driven me to hide, about the pride that had kept me from asking for help, about the night I took that envelope and ran. I told them about Jenny finding me, about Pastor Jean driving 4 hours, about coming home to face what I'd done. And I told them about the mercy that had chased me down when I was still running. When I finished, the room was silent. Then a man in the front row stood up. "My name is Kevin," he said, his voice shaking. "And I'm sitting here tonight because I embezzled $40,000 from my company. I've been running for 6 months. My wife doesn't know. My kids don't know. Nobody knows. And I've been telling myself there's no way back, that I've gone too far." He was crying now, and several other men had stood to put their hands on his shoulders. "But if there's mercy for you," Kevin continued, "maybe there's mercy for me too." "There is," I said. "I promise you, there is. It won't be easy, but mercy doesn't promise easy. It just promises it won't give up." After my talk, the line of men waiting to speak with me stretched out the door. Each one had a story: addiction, affairs, theft, violence, choices they couldn't take back. Each one thought they were too far gone. Each one needed to hear that they weren't. I talked with them until midnight, long after the conference organizers had packed up and left. I gave out my phone number to at least 20 guys, told them to call me anytime, day or night. One of them was a pastor who'd been sleeping with his secretary for 2 years. "How do I come back from this?" he asked. "How do I face my church, my wife, my kids, the same way I did? One terrifying, honest step at a time. And you let the people who love you help carry you. What if they don't forgive me? Some won't. That's part of the cost. But some will. And the ones who do? They'll show you what God's grace looks like with skin on it." I drove home the next morning thinking about all those men, all those stories, thinking about how mercy was still running, still catching people, still refusing to quit. My phone rang as I crossed into Alabama. It was Derek. "Hey, man, I've got news," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The parole board approved my request. I'm getting released early. Derek had been back in prison for 6 months, not for a new crime, but for a technical violation of his parole. He'd missed a meeting with his parole officer because he'd been at the hospital with one of his recovery program guys who'd overdosed. The system didn't care about the context, just the violation. "That's incredible," I said. "When?" 2 weeks. "And Marcus, I've been offered a job. Full-time position running a recovery program at a church in Montgomery. Room and board included." "That's amazing, man. It's because of you. They read your book, saw the chapter about me, reached out. They want someone who's been through it, who understands." His voice cracked. 5 years ago, I was convinced my life was over, that I'd die in prison. And now I'm going to be doing for other people what you did for me. After we hung up, I had to pull over because I was crying too hard to drive safely. This was what mercy looked like. Not just saving one person, but that one person going on to save others. Who saved others? Who saved others? An endless chain of grace. When I got home, Amy and Ruth were in the backyard. Ruth was 7 now, smart and funny and full of questions about everything. She ran to me, and I scooped her up. "Daddy, Mrs. Chen told me something today," she said. What's that, sweetheart? She said you used to be bad. Is that true? Amy and I exchanged a look. We'd known this conversation was coming, but I'd hoped to wait a few more years. Let's sit down, I said. We sat in the grass, Ruth between us, and I told my daughter the truth. Not all the details, she was too young for that, but the basics, that Daddy had made some very bad choices, that I'd stolen money from the church and run away, that I'd hurt people who loved me. But Grandma and Grandpa and Pastor Gene didn't give up on me, I said. They came after me, and they helped me become someone better. Are you still bad? She asked. Sometimes I still make mistakes, but I'm trying to be good. And when I mess up, I don't run away anymore. I face it and fix it. Like when I broke the lamp and told you? Exactly like that. You were scared I'd be mad, but you told the truth anyway. That's being brave. She thought about that for a moment, then said, I'm glad Pastor Gene came after you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be my daddy. I pulled her close, overwhelmed by the simple grace of a child who could hold my past and present together without judgment. That Sunday, I preached about running and returning, about the prodigal son who came home expecting judgment and found a party instead, about a God who doesn't wait for us to clean ourselves up before he runs toward us. Some of you are running right now, I said, looking out at the congregation. Maybe not physically, but in your heart. You're hiding something, carrying shame you think will destroy you if anyone finds out. And you're convinced that if God knew the real you, he'd give up. I paused, letting that land. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who ran as fast and as far as he could, God doesn't give up. Ever. He'll chase you into the darkest places you can find. He'll send people after you when you think you're alone. He'll keep running until he catches you, and then he'll carry you all the way home. After the service, a teenager I didn't recognize approached me. She was maybe 16 with dyed black hair and a nose ring. I'm pregnant, she blurted out, and I haven't told anyone. I'm so scared. My parents are going to kill me. What's your name? I asked gently. Mia. Mia, can I tell you something? You being here, telling me this, that took courage. And whatever happens, you're not alone. We're going to help you. I got Amy, and together we sat with Mia in my office. We called her parents, who came immediately, and after the initial shock, wrapped their daughter in a hug and told her they loved her. We connected them with resources, with counseling, with a support group for young parents at the church. 6 months later, Mia had a healthy baby boy. She named him Marcus. Because, she said, holding him at his dedication, you showed me that mistakes aren't the end of the story. They're just the middle, and the middle can lead somewhere beautiful. Around this time, I got a letter from someone I never expected to hear from again. It was from the reporter, Jennifer Martinez, who'd interviewed me all those years ago. She'd left journalism and was now working at a nonprofit that helped people with criminal records find employment. I've thought about your story often over the years, she wrote. It changed how I saw my work, how I saw people. I realized I'd been so focused on exposing wrongdoing that I'd forgotten to look for redemption. Thank you for showing me what that looks like. She asked if I'd be willing to consult with her organization to help them understand how churches and communities could better support people trying to rebuild their lives after incarceration. I said yes. That partnership led to others. I started speaking at prisons, at rehab centers, at conferences for church leaders who wanted to learn how to create cultures of grace. Amy and I started a nonprofit that provided transitional housing and job training for people fresh out of prison or rehab. Our house became a revolving door of people starting over. Some stayed for a few weeks, some for months. They ate at our table, played with our daughter, became part of our family. Not all of them made it. Some relapsed, some went back to old patterns. But many did make it. And watching them graduate from our program and move into their own places, never got old. "Aren't you worried?" my mom asked one day, watching a man I'd only known for 3 weeks help Ruth with her homework. "Having strangers in your house? Around Ruth?" "They're not strangers, Mom. They're family. And Ruth is learning something more valuable than safety. She's learning compassion. She's learning that people are more than their worst moments." "You sound like your grandmother," Mom said with tears in her eyes. "She'd be so proud of you." One evening, about 12 years after I'd come home, I was sitting on my porch when a car pulled into the driveway. A man got out, tall, thin, maybe in his 40s. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. "Marcus Webb?" he asked. "That's me. You don't remember me, but I was the cop who pulled you over that morning at the rest stop outside Columbus, Georgia, Officer Bryant." I remembered him now, the trooper who'd checked my license while 3,000 stolen dollars sat on the floor of my truck. "I remember," I said. "What can I do for you?" "I just wanted to tell you, I've followed your story over the years. The news, interview, your book, everything. And I wanted you to know that morning, I knew something was wrong. I could see it in your eyes. But I didn't know what to do, so I just let you go. You probably saved my life," I said. "If you'd found that money, if you'd arrested me, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe I wouldn't have ended up in Atlanta. Maybe Jenny wouldn't have found me. Maybe I wouldn't be here." "I've thought about that a lot," he said, "about how close you were to going a completely different direction. And I realized sometimes mercy looks like not knowing what to do and just trusting that God does." We talked for an hour, sitting on that porch. He told me he'd left law enforcement and become a social worker, working with at-risk youth. Said my story had changed how he saw his job, had made him believe in second chances in a way he never had before. "You changed my life by telling your story," he said. I just wanted to say thank you. After he left, I sat there thinking about all the ways mercy had worked in my life. The big, obvious moments, Jenny calling, Pastor Jean coming after me, the church board choosing restoration. But also the small moments, the cop who let me go, the librarian who pointed me toward help, Mrs. Patterson who prayed every morning, Miguel who brought me tamales, Emily who told me it gets easier. Mercy wasn't just one big rescue. It was 1,000 small choices people made to not give up, to keep believing, to run a little faster. That night, I got a Facebook message from Jason, the guy who'd texted me years ago after stealing from his employer. He'd come to see me, confessed what he'd done, and I'd walked with him through the process of making it right. "Just wanted you to know," he wrote, "I made my last restitution payment today. Took me 8 years, but I'm finally free. And I start a new job Monday, working with a program that helps people with criminal records. Funny how that works out." It wasn't funny. It was mercy. It was grace. It was the way God took broken things and made them beautiful. I thought about Kevin from the men's conference in Atlanta. I'd gotten a message from him, too, just last week. He'd confessed to his wife, to his company, to the police. He'd lost his job, but kept his family. He was working 3 jobs to pay back what he'd stolen, and his church had surrounded him with support. "I'm not going to lie," he'd written. "This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I'm not running anymore. And that alone feels like freedom." I looked at my phone, at all these messages and updates and stories of people who'd been chased down by mercy and were now chasing others. And I realized something that took my breath away. This was what my grandmother had meant about God's love being like the ocean. You couldn't stop it. It just kept coming in waves, and each wave carried people home who turned around and became waves themselves, carrying others. I was just one wave in an endless ocean of grace. Ruth came outside then, ready for bed. "Daddy, will you tell me a story?" "What kind of story?" "The true kind. about when you were bad and became good. So I carried her inside, tucked her into bed, and told her the story one more time. About running and returning. About stealing and facing consequences. About people who refused to give up on a broken man. "The end?" she asked when I finished. "No, sweetheart, not the end, just the beginning. Because mercy doesn't have an ending. It just keeps going." She fell asleep with a smile on her face, and I sat there watching her breathe, thinking about how close I'd come to missing all of this. This daughter, this life, this chance to help others find their way home. I almost missed it because I was running. But mercy ran faster. It always does.